I really should have ran these 2 panels. I'll do it next year.
I should have ran 2 panels. All right, you guys ready
Next year,
to learn?
I'm so good at anime.
I'm just gonna start off like I told you guys already, but It's Always Sunny clip because it's just perfect.
Yo, hey, buddy. I got some turpentine, some wax, and some high-gloss boat paint. This shit is really expensive.
Oh, dude, yeah, you're telling me. I picked us up some new slacks and docksiders so we could have the right look, and fit in and everything. We're running pretty low on remaining dick towel money, though.
Plus, we gotta fill that thing up with gas.
I know, man. We gotta pop by the department store, pick up the mattress. And I want to get a nice one, too. You know what I'm saying?
The what? The mattress? What do we need a mattress for?
What do you mean, what do we need a mattress for? Why in the hell do you think we just spent all that money on a boat? The whole purpose of buying the boat in the first place was to get the ladies nice and tipsy topside so we can take them to a nice, comfortable place below deck and, they can't refuse because of the implication.
Oh, okay. You had me going there for the first part. The second half kind of threw me.
Well, dude, think about it. She's out in the middle of nowhere with some dude she barely knows. She looks around her. What does she see? Nothing but open ocean. There's nowhere for me to run. What am I going to do? Say no?
Okay, that that seems really dark.
No, it's not dark. You're misunderstanding me, bro. Okay?
I think I am.
Yeah, you are. Because if the girl said no, then the answer obviously is no.
No.
But the thing is she's not gonna say no. She would never say no because of the implication.
Now, you've said that word implication a couple of times. What implication?
The implication that things might go wrong for her if she refuses to sleep with me. Now, not that things are gonna go wrong for her, but she's thinking that they will.
But it sounds like she doesn't want to have sex.
Why aren't you
with
understanding this?
I don't.
She doesn't know whether she wants to have sex with me. It's that
She
that's
doesn't
not
know?
the issue.
Are you gonna hurt women?
I'm not gonna hurt these women.
Okay.
Why would I ever hurt these women?
I don't
I
know.
feel like you're not getting this at all.
I'm not getting it.
God damn. Well, don't you look at me like that. You certainly wouldn't be in any danger.
So they are in danger.
No one's in any danger. How can I make that any more clear to you? Okay, it's an implication of danger. You know what? Just drop it.
Let's drop it.
You're not gonna
Let's
buy your shit and let's get out of here.
All right, so I start off with that clip because starting into dark humor, I think any It's Always Sunny clip is really the best place to start, and especially that one, just because the implication. So, as you all know by now, my panel is Laughing at Death. It's an exploration of dark humor. I was really inspired after I watched Dr. Strangelove, which is one of the films I'm going to be talking about, to really look into dark humor as a function. It's something I've always kind of delved into in my own life, always something I've been interested in, but I was kind of interested in kind of understanding like why it exists and what its purpose is. Like, why are we able to enjoy dark humor? Why can we look at something awful and laugh at it? What benefit do we get from laughing at something? So just to quickly run through, I think most people here understand by now what dark humor is, but just to run through it. Dark humor, it's also known as black humor, black comedy, dark comedy, etc. I'm going to use those terms pretty much interchangeably. It is a subgenre of comedy and satire because it uses both. It's, of course, dark humor. Of course, there's going to be comedy in it, laughing at it, but it's also, a lot of dark comedy tends to be used for satirical purposes, and that's why it also gets put under the subgenre category. It's like Strangelove. It's like a perfect example of that because that's satire on the incompetence of America. So it's based very heavily in cynicism and skepticism, this idea of questioning and, taking a darker look at things, not looking at the bright side, looking at the dark side. And it basically takes the conventions of what do we deal with tragedy, what do we deal with horror, and twist it and questions our reactions to them. And basically, dark humor finds comedy and tragedy. It's the simplest way to put it. It's the simplest way to explain it. It comes from very heavily the Surrealist movement in France. It was defined by this guy, Andre Breton, in 1935. He wrote the book Anthology of Black Humor. He was a Surrealist author, and this was the first time anyone really defined black humor. This wasn't really where black humor was invented, in a sense, because the book really is nothing more than him describing what he thinks dark humor is, where it comes from, and then on top of that, he gives examples of works like Poe is in the book, and a couple other writers from the time were used as examples of black humor. I'm going to run through Surrealism quickly. Does everyone kind of have an understanding of Surrealism, or no? More or less. I planned like this for people who don't know. what's going on, and it's just a group of people I've probably told all this stuff to already. I'm just gonna run through it real fast. Surrealism's an art movement. It started in France. It's it uses Freudian psychology quite a bit because Freud had the whole breakdown of dreams and analysis of dreams. He published that book on what he thought reoccurring symbols in dreams meant and what they represented, and just this whole theory on why we should look into dreams. We now know that most of it's bullshit, but it started looking into that, and Surrealist movement really, really embraced it for artistic. So it took dream reality and mixed it with our own reality. It's where you get Salvador Dali, perfect surrealist, quintessential surrealist artist. That's The Big Sleep. Everyone knows Melting Clocks, where you take familiar looking shapes and you present it in an unfamiliar way. Sir, do you have something to share? Are you interrupting for a reason? Messing. But taking familiar shapes, presenting them in a very dreamlike fashion. When I first did this presentation for my class, I kind of stopped at surrealism, but I was looking more into it, and you can't really talk about dark humor today without also looking at the absurd, which the whole philosophy of the absurd, which comes from Albert Camus. And the basic idea of the absurd is the universe doesn't care about you. Then the infinite largeness of the universe, you're so absolutely just don't matter at all. Best example of the absurd, I think, was I telling this to you earlier about Hitchhiker's Guide? Who was I talking to Hitchhiker's Guide about earlier today? Maybe that was my mom. I was telling everybody. But Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, in the second book, it has this device that I more or less refer to as weaponized absurdism. It's a box that you step inside of, and it shows you exactly how tiny you are in the universe. And once you understand that, you die instantly because it's such a soul-crushingly, mind-shattering reality of how insignificant you are that it just instantly kills you. And that's more or less a weaponized version of the idea of the absurd. And it was a real thing that absurdists at the time, people who dealt with the absurd, struggled with, where the main question of the absurd became, well, why don't I kill myself? And moving past that, different philosophers had different reasons to move past it. Camus had the idea that you should just move past it to move past it. More or less, I could be completely wrong with that. I just really started looking into Camus. But that's more or less the idea of the absurd. And the interesting thing about the absurd is it takes reality and kind of shows how real it is on like a grander scheme of things, in a sense, where you have your tardy slip?
Yes.
Oh.
But my dog ate it.
I'm sorry. Well, now you have to eat your dog.
That's fine.
So, surrealism very much takes takes reality and presents it dreamlike, and absurdism takes reality and presents it as like startlingly reality. And that kind of amalgamation, the crossroads, the intersection of those two philosophies is kind of where we get dark humor, because dark humor definitely has a surrealist quality to it, inherent surrealist quality, because you're taking something that you would, a reality, tragedy, death, suffering, stuff like that, and you're laughing at it. You're invoking a series of emotions that you normally wouldn't feel from those things in real life. And the absurdist aspect comes in because that's what really allows us to laugh, where it's that understanding of how small we are, understanding of how insignificant we are, that allows us to be able to laugh. Surrealism really winds up being the means in which black humor can be delivered, and absurdism is the reason why we can kind of comprehend dark humor. Next question, obviously, is what's the point? Like, all right, we understand how it works, we understand why it works, but why should we do it? And that's kind of where I'm really trying to ask with this presentation is kind of what's the benefit of looking at black humor? Just because we can do it doesn't mean we necessarily have to do it. And so I'm going to be showing clips from 3 different films, talking about 3 different films, to really explore this and try to come up with different answers, because there's many different reasons. And I'm really just going to be scraping the surface of what can be accomplished with black humor. But before I get into that, I really want to talk about 2 subgenres of black humor, because even though black humor is a subgenre in itself, it has subgenres. The first one I'll be talking about is gallows humor, and the second one will be horror comedy. Gallows humor is humor about particularly unpleasant things. If you think of dark humor as like a big circle, gallows humor is a tinier circle inside that contains like death, suffering, like the real horrible stuff. Where black humor can simply just be laughing at someone falling down a flight of stairs or something like that, something smaller where it's not long-lasting tragedy, but just minor, things that are bad that happen to them. While gallows humor is specifically looking at death, torture, rape. The most horrible of the horrible is really what gallows humor is. Horror comedy, on the other end, it's more comedy than it is. It plays up the comedy angle much heavier. It uses horror cliche for comedic purposes. It's not always the same thing as black comedy because black comedy, I kind of forgot to go over this. Black comedy is kind of very specific in the sense where you have to be laughing at tragedy for it to be black comedy. Simply having a tragic story with comedic things in it doesn't inherently make it a black comedy. Where like if you treat all the tragedy as serious within the story, but you have other comedic things that play along it, that's not necessarily what black humor is. Black humor is when you are laughing specifically at something that would normalize be something bad, something dramatic, something terrible, something horrifying. So some horror comedy movies can just have horror and comedy both in it, but some horror comedy movies, the comedy comes from the horror. The first movie I'm going to be talking about is Dr. Strangelove. This is kind of the quintessential black comedy. When people really look for black comedy, I think on the topics of black comedy, this movie has been written about the most. I'm going to run through a quick history and plot summary for people who don't know. Who's here seen the movie? Just you. All right, that's what I thought. Dr. Strangelove, Stanley Kubrick directed the film. I love Kubrick. I'm a Kubrick fanboy. I don't know who here has seen Kubrick, who hasn't. Not a lot of people love him, but I do. He read the book Red Alert, which was a drama about Cold War. The Cold War. This was coming out during like the height of the Cold War and kind of the silent nuclear arms race going on between America and Russia. And it was a very serious drama about how we can all be fucked to death any minute, and we're totally unprepared. So Kubrick read this and went, all right, that's my next movie. I need to make a movie about this. He read very heavily into Cold War, very heavy into nuclear arms, and then started writing the script, and he wrote script after script after script, and the more he wrote it, the more and more he couldn't not make it a comedy. And he found like, all right, we could show them saying that there's a nuclear launch going in like the war room, or we can show it in the hallway, we can show it in their bedroom, but I think it'd be best if we like showed that in their bathroom. And he was finding, like, just by changing the location, it totally twists this comedy out of it, where very serious matters put in these very unserious places, and you're getting these, like, weird reactions to it. And the reason why I was really inspired by Strangelove to do this whole research, do this whole presentation, was because when I first watched this movie, I found myself laughing, but not because I was laughing, but because I was feeling so many emotions that laughing was the only thing that came out of me. And that's a really great way to explain Strangelove, because it's terrifying. So I'm going to show a clip just so you can understand. This is one of... Every scene in the movie is great, but this is one of the best. That is on. I wanted to introduce the characters. The guy talking on the right there is the Russian embassy. Is that the right way to refer to it? He's a figure from Russia. He's representing Russia in the war room. This is the war room. He's going to be talking to the general, and he's going to be talking to the president. And Strangelove shows up at one point. You'll know him when you see him.
Our studies show that even the worst fallout is down to a safe level after 2 weeks.
You've obviously never heard of Cabal Thorium-G.
Well, what about it?
Cabal Thorium-G has a radioactive half-life of 93 years. If you take, say, 50 H-bombs in the 100 megaton range and jacket them with Cabal Thorium-G, when they are exploded, they will produce a doomsday shroud, a lethal cloud of radioactivity which will encircle the Earth for 93 years.
What a load of commie bull. I mean, after all.
Afraid I don't understand something, Alexei. Is the Premier threatening to explode this if our planes carry out their attack?
No, sir. It is not a thing a sane man would do. The doomsday machine is designed to trigger itself automatically.
But surely you can disarm it somehow?
No, it is designed to explode if any attempt is ever made to untrigger it.
Automatically?
It's an obvious commie trick, Mr. President. We're wasting valuable time. Look at the big boy. They're getting ready to clobber us.
But this is absolute madness, Ambassador. Why should you build such a thing?
There were those of us who fought against it, but in the end we could not keep up with the expense involved in the arms race, the space race, and the peace race. And at the same time, our people grumbled for more nylons and washing machines. Our doomsday scheme cost us just a small fraction of what we've been spending on defense in a single year. But the deciding factor was when we learned that your country was working along similar lines, and we were afraid of a doomsday gap.
This is preposterous. I've never approved of anything like that.
Our source was the New York Times.
Dr. Strangelove, do we have anything like that in the works? A moment, please, Mr. President.
Under the authority granted me as Director of Weapons Research and Development, I commissioned last year a study of this project by the Bland Corporation. Based on the findings of the report, my conclusion was that this idea was not a practical deterrent for reasons which at this moment must be all too obvious.
Then you mean it is possible for them to have built such a thing?
Mr. President, the technology required is easily within the means of even the smallest nuclear power. It requires only the will to do so.
But how is it possible for this thing to be triggered automatically and at the same time impossible to untrigger?
Mr. President, it is not only possible, it is essential. That is the whole idea of this machine, you know. Deterrence is the art of producing in the mind of the enemy the fear to attack. And so, because of the automated and irrevocable decision-making process which rules out human meddling, the doomsday machine is terrifying, it's simple to understand, and completely credible and convincing.
Gee, I wish we had one of them doomsday machines, Stainsy.
But this is fantastic, Strangelove. How can it be triggered automatically?
Well, it's remarkably simple to do that. When you merely wish to bury bombs, there's no limit to the size. After that, they are connected to a gigantic complex of computers. Now then, a specific and clearly defined set of circumstances under which the bombs are to be exploded is programmed into a tape memory bank. A single roll of tape
Strangelove.
can store all the information.
What kind of a name is that? That ain't no crowd name, is it,
In the
Stainsy?
25
He changed it when he became a citizen. It used to be Merkwürdig Liebe.
A crowd by any other name, most of it.
Is that the whole point of the doomsday machine is lost. If you keep it a secret, why didn't you tell the world, eh?
I love how he says that exact line. All right, so picked up on the plot. Oh, why does it no longer a presentation? There we go. I pick up on the plot. It's obviously about the Cold War. The whole thing is a B-52 bomber is due to a general who went rogue, sent them a signal to drop bombs in Russia, and now everyone's screwed because there was no way to stop the signal. There's no way to reach the thing now. There's no way to stop the bomb from being dropped, and Russia has a doomsday device that if anything touches them, the whole world is gone. And all because Russia kept it a secret, which defeats the point of a doomsday device, like Strangelove explained. The point of this really was to really show, capsulate the Cold War fears and really kind of show the severity of the situation. People understood at the time how tense things were, but people didn't quite understand how close to thermonuclear annihilation we could have fallen into at any moment. So the movie was kind of there to inform, but it's also there to satirize. One of the best moments of this film, I couldn't find a picture of, I couldn't find a video of, because not enough people have really appreciated this the way you need to. The very beginning of the film starts off with a warning that was put there by the government, informing you that the movie's a comedy and nothing in it could possibly happen. That's a lie. Because the second the movie came out, policies were changed to stop this from happening. Because even though the government made them put a warning that claimed that none of it could happen, it could have all happened at any second, at any time. Just one person needed to go rogue, one person needed to throw it off, and we could have all been it's it's kind of insane that this movie needed to come out to kind of change these things, even though the government refused that it was true, even till after it was out, and then they secretly changed everything. So a real good point of this movie was it used black humor. Well, the question becomes, why did it use black humor? Why wasn't it just a serious drama? Of course, you could have presented all the same information. I think the satirization and the overblowing of the characters, like, everyone's over the top in that room. You have the ex-German maniac Strangelove talking about a bomb who's now working for the government. And you have this general who, hearing about this thing that is totally going to kill everyone by the end of the day, saying, man, I wish we had one of those. And it's a total lambasting and lampooning of our government officials. And I think I think the reason why humor works so well, black humor worked better than just a straight-up drama, is really the fact that I think it makes us understand it a little bit better. A straight-up drama you can get, the seriousness you can get, but I don't think it will strike home quite as clearly as something like this movie does. There's scenes like this in the entire movie, ones that are way more stressful than this one is, ones where people are totally not taking things the right way, and it's a way to show that, like, it's a way to satirize our government officials and showing how they're not taking it serious. And even though it's not a truly accurate depiction, it still is on some level, and it resonates with people on some level. And I think the reason why black comedy was perfect for this film was because it realized a message in a way that everyone can kind of understand it in an immediacy that was needed. The next film I'm going to talk about is an example of gallows humor. It's an amazing film. It's called It's Such a Beautiful Day. Has anyone heard of this film in here? You have? Have you watched it?
I think so. It's by Don Hurst.
Yes. If you've seen rejected commercials, Billy's Balloon, stuff like that, same guy. It's Such a Beautiful Day, Don Hertzfeldt. It was a 3-part movie series it was like 3 short films. They combined into one long one called It's Such a Beautiful Day. And it follows this guy named Bill. And it kind of goes through, it's clear, it's never said explicitly what's wrong with him, but he has some sort of illness, both mental and physical, and he's nearing closer to the end of his life. And the film basically shows him at kind of the start of his worst, right up until it all kind of comes together. And the film is about accepting one's death in a way, and it is about accepting mental illness. And it shows in a really interesting way, and the fact that it uses comedy is really interesting. So I'm going to show a clip, just because no one in here has seen it.
Not much happened at work. Bill made a pyramid out of 3 staplers, and the new guy swallowed a paper clip and was rushed out in a wheelchair. The guy in the next cubicle over told Bill about a thing he saw on TV, about identical twins who were separated at birth, but had individually grown up to be serial killers. It was as though they didn't have any choice in what they turned into. Genetics is pretty messed up, he said, as his chewing gum flung itself from his mouth. At lunch, he told Bill about a physics book he was reading about time, how the passing of time is just an illusion, because all of eternity is actually taking place at once. The past never vanishes away, and the future has already happened. All of history is fixed and laid out, like an infinite landscape of simultaneous events that we simply happen to travel through in one direction. Bill made a joke that he could have sworn he'd been told that somewhere before, but the guy just stared at him like he didn't get it.
So the whole movie is very much like that. It's presented in this kind of, as you can see, very dreamlike sort of thing, where it's these very low detail characters, but then sometimes it uses images, video, and stuff like that. The whole thing's kind of beautiful. It's all over the place with seriousness and comedy. There are some scenes in that movie that even just thinking about them, I'll start to cry, because that movie gets really hard to watch sometimes. But there's also some really great comedic moments, kind of like that, and stuff like this. So the movie kind of becomes an exploration of death and an exploration of mental illness. And I'm saying exploration because it's not just talking about the topic. It's not just presenting the topic, it's exploring the many facets of these topics, where I think the reason why he really chose to do both comedy and tragedy for this movie is really to show that those things can both be found in death and mental illness. There's comedic moments, there's tragic moments, there's a whole wealth of emotions that could be felt from a situation, and it's kind of the point of the movie to kind of point out those things and realize those things. And I think it's a perfect example of how surrealism and absurdism is both used in dark humor as well, where it has the very surrealist presentation, the art style, the filming. It's non-chronological, it's all over the place, and it's got this very dreamlike feel to it with that narration, but at the same time it's showing an immensely real situation, which is the kind of absurdist aspect, especially because the point it kind of comes to is that you have to kind of accept these things. You have to accept the good and bad, the terrifying of death and mental illness, and also the levity of death and mental illness. And the point of that really comes to be the title of the film, which is no matter how much darkness there is, no matter how much their evil is, if you can just accept it, find a way to understand and deal with your situation, you can find beautiful days. And it's on Netflix. I think it's still on Netflix. Absolutely watch the movie. I kickstarted it to come out on Blu-ray, and it's fucking amazing. Now, to kind of, that movie is great for its both comedic and like tragic aspects. Next movie is pure comedy. House or Hausu. It is directed by Nobuhiko Obayashi. I can't describe it. I really, really can't describe this movie. I've tried so many times, and nothing does it justice beyond just showing a clip. So we're just gonna go right into a clip.
おしゃれ見てこない行こう嫌だここにいるねメロディー行こうおしゃれメロディーこっち向いてメロディーメロディーメロディーおしゃれおしゃれおしゃれおしゃれメロディーこっち向いてメロディーおしゃれおしゃれメロディー あらないわ
Alright, so I could have told you the plot of that movie, but as you can see, that would have never even brought it up. Yeah, it's a shitpost. Alright, it's Adult Swim tier, but it came out in 1977. This movie, alright, to give some backstory on the movie, because it only makes it weirder when you know the true intent of the film, this movie was Toho's response to Jaws. Jaws came out in America, and it was like a blockbuster horror film, and Toho, the people who made Godzilla, were like, we need a blockbuster horror film. So they hired this guy to do a horror movie. He's like, sure, I can do that. He goes home, he talks to his daughter for ideas. She was like 6 at the time. He's like, well, what are you scared of? And she's like, fluffy cats, old clocks eating me, and pianos cutting off my fingers. And he went, got it. And he did all of it. And that's the movie that came out. The movie follows like a group of, I think it's like 8 girls, each with like the most obvious names. The one who was killed by the piano, her name is Melody. She likes music. There's Fantasy. She's lightheaded. There's Mac. She eats a lot. There's Kung Fu. She does Kung Fu. And it follows the naming scheme like that. They're all super archetypal. They go to the main girl, her name Beauty, her family's house, her aunt's house, and it's evil and it kills them. It's a haunted house, essentially. And it was kind of a flop when it came out. It was only recently be making a resurgence because hipsters like me have found the movie through Criterion Collection, and I love it. So the thing that I really ask with this movie, because it really is like, every death is kind of more or less like that. There's some a little bit more serious. Like I say the one where I think it's Professor who gets killed by the clock. That one's a bit creepy because it's got like green and purple lights and the blood coming out of the clock. Some of the scenes in the movie are really cool. That's just perfect, though. I can't overstate how amazing that scene is with that spot-on blue screen technology. Either way, the thing that I kind of think about most when talking about this movie is it's there to play with our fears, specifically to laugh at our childish fears. Because watching this movie as an adult, I saw it maybe like 2-3 years ago. I watched it in like University Hall for the first time. I broke into one of the rooms and just watching the projector there. You laugh the whole time. The whole movie, I'm laughing the whole way through. It's ridiculous, it's goofy, it's terrible special effects, but like totally self-aware the entire time. But I could totally see myself, if I saw this piano scene when I was like really young, like if I was flipping through the channels and saw it like on Adult Swim one night, I probably would be fucking terrified. Like as a kid, it's totally things that I think we would be afraid of if we see people getting killed in weird ways, but it kind of melds with kids' minds are just afraid of fucking everything. So I think the point of the movie really becomes to laugh at these childish fears, where he went to what his daughter was genuinely afraid of at the time and made a comedy horror movie out of it. And I think one of the things that are appreciated about it, it's not a grand message like the other two. Like the first, Dr. Strangelove is about realizing true information that needs to be understood about the Cold War. It's Such a Beautiful Day is about accepting death, accepting things that are out of your control, making light of things that should normally terrify you, because in an attempt to kind of accept these things. This movie is more shallow point of just to laugh at ourselves a bit, which isn't a totally shallow, it's an amicable thing to do, it's an important thing to do, because it shows kind of, I guess, growth and how we evolve as people and how our minds evolve, because like, killer piano to a kid might be really scary. Everyone knows the piano in Super Mario 64 that chases after you, right? That's terrifying. But as an adult, you recognize that that's not a real thing to be scared of. And it's kind of like this. It's to show ourselves, show what we used to be afraid of, show who we used to be, and kind of point and laugh at that, and laugh at ourselves in a way. That's kind of the movies. And as you can see, there's a wide range of different things that can be achieved through using dark humor, and things that dark humor can achieve. Maybe it's not the only way to achieve these points, maybe it's not the only way to get these things across, but it's an effective way, and it's something that can resonate with people on a really deep level and really show them these kind of interesting points and interesting worldviews. I'm going to run through just, 6 movies or so that I feel are also really good examples of dark humor that I would have gone into if I had infinite time, which I'm realizing I kind of do. But the first two movies I'm going to go through are like, each one kind of pairs up with the order I went through the genre. So a couple dark humor, a couple gallows humor, and a couple horror comedy. RoboCop's a really great example of a dark comedy. Dark humor, dark comedy. It's a total dystopian future in Detroit where things are just only a little bit worse than Detroit. And it uses dark humor as a way to critique our economic system at the time. The idea of free market enterprise is totally the whole point of RoboCop, and how don't do that. Then you have private companies buying the police station, and then the police station's buying dead bodies, and then turning those dead bodies into cops that can't arrest the owners of the company. RoboCop's greatly cynical, greatly skeptical. It's one of the funniest movies, but it's also really gruesome, really bloody. It's a quintessential 80s film. We've all seen RoboCop, right? Yeah, everyone watch RoboCop and watch RoboCop. It's not the remake. Also, very strong about that. Watch the original. Funny Games is another. Have you seen Funny Games?
Yeah.
Funny Games I put on here.
I think there's two of them, right? There's the U.S. one and
I'll recommend the U.S. one because this is an English-speaking audience and they're shot for shot the same. I'm so glad someone's seen it. I think my girlfriend questioned putting it on here at first because first watch of that movie, it really comes across as like a really terrifying horror. But then second watch of this movie, I was laughing pretty much the whole way through. It's one of the most amazing films I've ever seen pull it off. It's like an expertly done horror film about a home invasion where this rich upper class family, two guys come in and they play a game where they make a bet. They bet that they're going to kill them by the end of the night, and they bet they're not going to be dead. And that's kind of the plot of the movie. A lot of off-screen violence done in a really terrifying way, but there's a lot of really satirical, subtle things going on that you really catch on the second run through, and it's a hysterical movie. It needs 2 watches, but I really recommend it if you can find it. You can't buy Blu-rays in America anymore. There's one on Amazon that goes for like $200, so pirate it.
Can't legally say that.
Oh, I'll edit it out of the video. The good example of gallows humor, this was originally in my presentation. I swapped it out for It's Such a Beautiful Day. This one really is obviously gallows humor. It's called Death by Hanging. It's a Japanese gallows humor film. It's really, really, really dry satire. The humor is not always immediately apparent, but it's really funny when you truly understand what's going on. It's about a Korean man who raped and killed a woman, and he's being hung for his crimes. And when they hang him, it doesn't go through, and instead he just forgets who he was. So the rest of the movie is the people who are in charge of hanging him working really hard to remind him who he was again. That way they could justify killing him again, because they're not going to go home without this guy killed. And like, you can't just kill him if he doesn't remember what his crimes are. And so the movie kind of follows that, and it gets really, really surrealist at one point where they wind up entering someone's dreams, and the embodiment of Korea shows up at one point. It's a really surreal film, but it's great. The whole point of the film is to criticize Japan for its hanging policy at the time, like its death penalty policy, where the trailer of the film is literally just the director showing the room that they recreated for the hanging for the film and how it's like inch for inch accurate to a real hanging room, and kind of explaining his literal views on death penalty. It's a really, message is clear, but it's really well done. I really recommend that. Has anyone heard of Excision? This is what I have a hard time recommending this film because it's for like 1% of people. I just happen to fall into that 1%. I also have a hard time. It's one of those other films where it's kind of weird on the cusp of horror comedy, gallows humor. It's got John Waters as a priest in it, and if that means anything to you, that just screams comedy to me. John Waters did Hairspray and other things. He looks like a pedophile, but I love him. Excision is about a girl. She's an outcast and she's obsessed with surgery. It's really the most I'll say about it. It's really visually compelling, really psychosexual in a lot of ways. It's a really disturbing film. But there's a lot of comedic elements to it as well. And it's a really dark film. If you're interested in this movie at all, watch the trailer, and you'll know from the trailer if the movie's for you or not. If you watch it and you're like, oh, I might be interested, maybe give it a shot. But if you see it and you're like, that seems a little weird for me, don't even attempt. It's not that making a judgment. It's just, this movie's not for everyone. It's really hard to watch at some points. For horror comedy, straight up horror comedy, Clue. Clue is, watch Clue. It's the most amazing comedy film ever, based off a board game and just in general, that did terribly because it was so funny people weren't laughing, to the point where every line in that movie is a joke. Every single thing is said in that movie, even down to the casting of the actors, was a joke, being that the person who plays the murder victim, his real name is like Nobody or something like that, and they're like, that's great, you should be the murder victim. The movie is perfect. Every line's a joke. Great cast. Tim Curry's in it. Martin Mull's in it. Doc Brown's in it. It's a perfect goddamn cast. Every line's a joke. The jokes come so fast in that movie that people genuinely didn't know when to laugh. So people thought the movie wasn't good because they weren't laughing, but really it was so overwhelmingly funny that you blip back to zero. It's an amazing film, watch it. It's about death, a lot of jokes about death, a lot of jokes about everything, that movie. It's one of the best horror comedies. And then another really good one is Tucker and Dale vs. Evil. Not enough people know about this movie. It's the perfect reversal of the Psycho Hillbilly Killer movie, where our heroes are just two hillbillies going to their cabin in the woods for the weekend, and the people like torturing them are kind of kids, because the kids think they're doing it in self-defense because they assume that these guys are killers who are going to try to murder them over the weekend. And it's hysterical. It's a lot of accidental death, a lot of laughing at death, it's a really fun movie. If you've seen movies like that before, it's a great reversal on that kind of thing. And it's totally worth it. I almost put Shaun of the Dead up here, but I feel like everyone knows Shaun of the Dead by this point. So I do Tucker and Dale vs. Evil, because it's right up there. Maybe not as good, but it's right up there, and it's not as well known. I was going to say everyone should subscribe to my YouTube channel because it's going up on there, but I think everyone in this room is subscribed to my YouTube channel already, or at least will see it on Facebook. Syntheside, you can find me on YouTube, find me on Twitter. You guys all message me privately anyway, so it doesn't matter. I was going to ask if there's any questions just to end. How much time do I have left? I think I might have a decent amount of time. Infinite amount of time? Is there?
It's 8 minutes till 8.
There's still people watching the room. Yeah. All right, so I kind of timed it perfectly. Are there any questions? Anything you guys want to ask? Any thoughts? Yeah, I mean, on Facebook, you can find me. I still think I'm part of the gamers group on Facebook. If you want to hit me up on Twitter, look for Syntheside. You'll find me there. I'm always shitposting on Twitter, so you can contact me there if you want to. Any questions about any of the things I brought up? Yeah.
Would you consider Brazil a good one as well?
I haven't seen Brazil. Brazil is a lot of people consider that. It's black comedy.
Python, so.
Yeah, a lot of people consider. Well, it's Terry Gilliam, not Monty Python, but that's just splitting hairs.
It's good.
I need to see it. It's totally up here. Most of the films I talked about here were Criterion films. I don't know if anyone knows Criterion Collection. Their whole. I actually have a whole with me. I brought. Is it in this bag that I have? Yes. I actually brought my copies of the films I was talking about. Dr. Strangelove, House, and It's Such a Beautiful Day. These two were released through Criterion. Criterion's a company that specializes in finding the best of the best films and releasing them the best they can. A lot of films they have the rights to, but they still won't release them because they can't find a good enough way to restore them, good enough way to get the audio perfect. They're really about getting things perfect to get the director's vision as true as possible. It also comes with a lot of cool things, like the Strangelove box is the best because it comes with, everyone comes with an essay about the film, and it's really great. The essay is presented as top secret information, and it's got books, it looks like a fake magazine. Have you ever seen a commie drink a glass of water? Which, if you've seen the movie, it's fucking hysterical that they include this. It's a really great addition. I always say look out for Criterion releases of your favorite films if you're looking for a film, because it's going to be the best version. It has the best special features, best everything. But Brazil is part of Criterion.
Yeah.
And
one last question.
Yeah.
I watched RoboCop and I loved it, but I heard 2 and 3 are bad. Should I watch 2 and 3?
I haven't watched 2. I've watched 3. Don't watch 3. Don't watch 3.
Don't watch the remake either.
Yeah, don't watch the remake. Remake is maybe the first 15 minutes of the remake is pretty good, but everything past that's stupid. 2 I haven't watched. I mean, you watch Red Letter Media, right? Yeah. They recommended 2. I started watching 2. I think I've seen it once or twice before. 2 is goofy. It's not as on the nose as the first one is. It's not as intelligent as the first one is, but it's still got some really great stuff to it from what they said, what Mike said. But 3 is the worst. 3 is PG-13 version, which RoboCop's hard R, NC-17 even, unrated edition. Criterion was the first to do the unrated edition of RoboCop, because you need all the blood and gore in that movie. Third one was PG-13 and had ninja robots that he had to fight on a jetpack. Don't watch the third movie; it ruined it. I recommend anything from Paul Verhoeven. He was the director of Starship Troopers. Is another amazing dark comedy because it's a fascist propaganda film. about like the world military, and a lot of people really hated the movie when it came out because they didn't pick up on the satire. They just thought it was a straight up serious, like, war is good and we should make our enemies feel scared film, which it's not. It's totally about how the U.S. military is disgusting fascists that should be shut down. That movie is great. I also don't know about the sequels for that one. I heard they get worse.
The second one is all right. The third one is.
You know they made children's toys for Starship Troopers?
I believe it.
Starship Troopers is not a... That's the end. Starship Troopers is not a... Alright, any other thoughts, any other questions? Any other films that you're wondering about?
That time.
Because the whole point of the movie is... It's set within a reality in which the free market enterprise, the idea that it's more or less corporations should be allowed to own anything.
It's really critical, almost like ANCAP.
Yeah, it's ANCAP. Basically, anyone can own anything if you have money and you can buy it. It doesn't matter. No regulations. And so what happens is it's a future in which Detroit is so poor that they sell the police station, like the police system, to this company OCP. And basically the movie follows what that future would be like.
Trump's America.
It's accurately Reagan's America. That's really what was pinpointing, which is why, as much as I don't like Reagan and what he did in reality, I love what he did for film, because all the best dystopian films came out due to his presidency. So I thank him for that.
Yeah. It's also critical of like letter of the law regulating.
Yes, because one of the best things, it criticizes also AI theorists of the time. It's a satire on them because what was it? It was the 3 laws of robotics is played with in the movie. That's something that's always brought up. That was who was the one who defined that? Do you remember the name? Was it Asimov?
Asimov, yes.
Yeah, he defined the 3 laws of robotics, which is what basically governs the stories I, Robot. That's where that was kind of played out. RoboCop goes one step further.
Secret fourth law.
Yeah, secret fourth law. You can't arrest the people who built you. And that's the secret fourth law. And that's the whole criticism where it's like, yeah, those 3 laws of robotics can be really helpful, but what happens when you have people? And that's really the issue. We have people. And people are inherently selfish and will take advantage of systems like that. So RoboCop criticizes a whole bunch of things, economics and even just other science fiction writers at the time. It's also a perfectly symmetrical film, as a fun fact.
The way people die is very ridiculous. In the beginning, there's a giant robot that's like, oh, here, we're going to introduce you. And he kind of taps the robot. He's like, you wouldn't do anything. And it's like, he's going to kill you in like 10 seconds. He's like, hi.
He's holding a gun.
Yeah,
That's what
he
happened.
held a gun.
Yeah, and then the robot says, you have put down the gun, 10 seconds to comply. So he puts it down, 9, 8, and everyone starts freaking out in the boardroom because the robot's still counting down and he doesn't have the gun. So he runs and the robot kills him, and it's like the bloodiest, most perfect death scene in the world.
Fell off the building.
No, he lands on a model of the city.
Yeah.
And what does the head of the company say? This isn't going to be good for shareholders?
Yes.
And that's what's funny about it. The most interesting thing about that scene, though, and this is something that I think is great about RoboCop, I love talking about this scene. I like really exploring genre, exploring tropes, exploring why things work the way they do in film. And one of the things about RoboCop that I really love is it has 2 scenes that are almost exactly the same, but invoke 2 incredibly different emotions. There's that scene where the guy gets shot up in the boardroom, which is really comedic and really funny. But there's also the scene in which RoboCop himself is shot up. Murphy is shot up by the gang members. And it's just as many bullets, just as innocent as a human being shot to death, like a ton. But that scene's really harrowing, really upsetting to watch. And it's kind of fascinating to watch basically the same thing, someone being way overkilled.
Tortured.
Yeah, tortured to one's like terrifying, one's one of the funniest, greatest scenes in all of movie history. RoboCop's really great with that. A lot of films are really great with that, playing that sort of thing, but that's a whole other topic.
I guess it's all about the execution.
Yeah, that's really what it comes down to. But it's interesting because it's like, what is it about the execution that really gets right? And that's where you get into analysis of like editing, sound, lighting, things like that. It's one of the things that made Starship Troopers so hard to understand for people, because that whole movie's lit like it's like an episode of 90210 or something like that. Like it's not lit like a harrowing, heroic war movie. It's lit like a made-for-TV special, but it's about like torturing the species of bugs and basically colonizing their planet against their will. But it's the weirdest thing. But that's a whole other thing. It's just, well, it comes down to execution. He did it right. He got his point across. When you watch it, you really understand what he's talking about. And he gets that satire across perfectly.
Oh, satire.
Yeah.
Wait, so the thing about, the first movie, how'd they end? The first movie,
Which movie?
Strangelove?
The one about the Cold War.
Watch the film. I'm not going to go into endings. I don't want to go into spoilers. I kind of chose things that are definitely not spoiler heavy just because I really want people to watch these films. They're all films that are great and deserve to be watched if you like film on any level. And they're not hard to find either. Except maybe Funny Games. Yeah, you'd be able to find them online, yeah.
I gotta say, that scene on the Cold War movie, it was kind of, it was ridiculous. It was so ridiculous that it was funny.
The movie's hysterical. The names of the characters are also really great in the film if you want to, like the general that trips over himself. The general that sets off the whole chain of events, his name is General Jack D. Ripper. Yes. There's also, what's the name of the president is Muff Merkin. There's a lot of really dirty jokes hidden throughout the entire movie because, I mean, I like the dirty joke invocation, especially with Strangelove, just because I think Kubrick was really calling out the Cold War for kind of being a dick measuring contest, which it absolutely was. It was threatening to measure the other person's dick. Cold War is... Are you talking within the film or...
In real life.
Oh, in real life? It's over, right?
It was mocking it.
Yeah, the film's mocking it, but yeah. You can do your own research into the Cold War. I'm not going into Cold War history.
You said that it caused the government to change.
Yes, it changed the policies about how we handle nuclear weapons and our codes given to allow the dropping of nuclear weapons. Because the whole point of the movie was that we don't really have a ton of restrictions and that anyone could set off this chain of events. And then they changed it where redundancy systems were put into place so you can't accidentally start off doomsday.
So what made them do it? Like the public pressured them, or the movie themselves made them?
Oh, the government just didn't realize. They just weren't aware that that's what they set up. And when they found out what the movie was about, they're like, no, of course that's not real. And then they watched the movie and they went, oh, all right.
Oh God, that can't actually happen.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna close up now.
So the government said that this situation cannot happen or something?
Pretty much, yeah.
I mean, sorry, who set that more, the government or the filmmaker?
Government.
Okay.
Filmmakers can't really push policy unless the filmmakers are also politicians, but I don't think that's ever been successful or happened. Yeah.
Okay,
all right.
That explains about that change.
Yep.
That is a very legitimate fear.
I think it's not
a random alien.
I think.
The last thing you want is
I think
just
there was
some random
another
alien destroy your life.
Is there?
So that's it?
Yeah, pretty much. That's the whole presentation. That's all I have. Good. Thanks. What panels are going on now?
That's it?
That's it?
I think it's just a tune like that J-pop group doing shit. That's it.
Honestly, I just want to go home.
Maybe it's just double check.
It's such a beautiful day.
I'm pretty sure I've seen it. I know I've seen like parts of it.
I love
Masquerade and then Tune. That's it.
I paid extra to get this.
It's just Masquerade and then Tune. That's it.
Shit.
It's 5 frames of a print of film.
That's fucking amazing.
Wait, is
Oh, wow.
this from the real thing?
Yeah.
It's the actual
It's actually, yeah, it's 5. It's basically 5 frames of the film.
They can't see it well.
You can't see it well. You need to really project it through something to really see it. I paid extra for it. But it's also got, this is a great collection because it was the Blu-ray, first time Blu-ray, but the good thing was he screwed up horribly and deleted basically everything. So we had to do a full rescan of all the footage, which turned out to be a good thing because now we had higher resolution scans of the original footage. It looks beautiful. There's everything's on. It's a full HD rescan of rejected commercials. A full rescan of Billy's Balloon.
Wait, there's an HD version of it?
Yeah, I have it on that Blu-ray. It's beautiful. Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. Don't you touch it.
It's because I have this on Blu-ray.
You can still buy it. They still have a bunch. He promotes it all the time. Billy's Balloon is great. I'm trying to think of what else is on there. Oh, it also has the Simpsons opening on there. But it's not allowed to say he has the Simpsons opening on there. Because I don't think he fully had the rights to it, but
It's
he
a birthday
out
gift
anyway.
from Brandon from 2 years ago.
So wait, so the one what's the title of the Cold War movie?
Doctor Strange.
Doctor Strangelove?
Yeah.
And what's your YouTube account?
Synthesize, it's up on the screen.
Wait, that's why.
Yes, that's exactly what it's
Still like 7 SPs in there.
Oh no.
CYT.
SYNT.
Yeah. Also, each of these has like here.
And what's your Facebook?
This. You can find me through the
Yeah, no, that's
gamers.
like all the pieces you put in here, and then you put it in there. You don't want them in there.
Okay,
I
and
just
you
don't
gamers,
feel like that.
you like Dr. Strangelove, what's that Chinese film? Like, doesn't sound that good.
The Japanese one?
Yeah.
House?
Yeah, that's it.
It's not for everyone. It's very wacky, very. You need to be a certain kind of person to enjoy that one also.
I know that the Japanese didn't like it.
It's just because it's such a weird film.
I mean, like, even I thought that Japanese like weird.
Sometimes it's more of a stereotype than it is an accuracy. It's just cultural differences. That's the thing. That's even weird for cultural.
Yeah, I heard that you like. No one played it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a weird film.
Because I heard.
Oh yeah,
you're
gonna at one point.
Why?
That's a really good scene. No, it was like a B film.
Last Saturday, I did. I cut.
It was like a
most of it.
blockbuster that was like a love film at the time. So
So
no
I
one
thought
really saw the film.
So wait, I thought
Really
that
just
people
this,
watched that.
and then
I
like
thought
the
that
right
people-
ears.
I thought
It
that
looks cool.
the director was hired in
Thanks.
order to
I
make
try.
It was,
I've
but
been meaning to
it doesn't always
hear
turn out that
from
way.
you.
Even in American
Thanks.
films, when things
I have
tend
a
to
lot
be
of
big
things.
blockbusters.
So what is your favorite Kubrick?
Yeah, that
I mean,
too.
my
I was
top
thinking like a
one.
deep one.
No, wait, what?
You're right. Deep one.
I just took it on faith that you were messing with me. I took it on faith.
So wait, what starts?
Thinking Full Metal Jacket.
Okay, so wait, what other films are there besides RoboCop? What other films?
There's RoboCop.
The moment I said it, I knew.
What was the other ones I said? I said RoboCop.
Death by Hanging.
Death by Hanging. Excision. Funny Games. Trying to remember all.